This conference will now be recorded.
All right. So in the last session that we had regarding automation, sorry, we were looking at how to just go ahead and let's say design a JSON file and then read it from PowerShell. Then go ahead and create objects in the Azure portal. When I say objects in Azure portal, it could be a resource group, it could be a storage account, it could be a container inside the storage account, and you can also go ahead and let's say upload the blobs inside that particular container. And all this could be done reading just from that particular JSON file out here. So this is what we've been doing until now. So we've been writing our logics, and while writing our logics, right, we went ahead, we made sure to use a lot of checks. Like for example, I put a check telling that if sorry, if a storage account already exists, don't create it, just tell me that it exists. And then I had things like else loops, wherein I'm telling, okay, fine, if it exists already, just go ahead and give me a statement telling it exists. And also I did tell in the check telling that if it doesn't exist, all right, and you're trying to do a get call, I'm also telling it explicitly to do an error action of silently continue. I'm giving the error actions. I'm doing a lot of things out here. And if there are multiple, let's say, resources that I want to create, then I need to do for each loops or for loop or while loop, do while, whatever it is, in order to adjust my data types. Also, PowerShell or Bash or any kind of any kind of a programming out of the box, it is serial in nature. What do I mean by this? Is that let's say we in using our program, so we are doing a for each, and we were able to create multiple, let's say, resource groups, multiple storages inside those resource groups, and so on and so forth. Out of the box, if you just go ahead and write a logic out there, it's first going to create the first resource group, then going to go to the storage account inside that particular resource group, then the container, then the second, then for the second team, then the third team, fourth team, so on and so forth. What this does is in the serial approach, the runtime of your script increases. I mean, isn't there a parallel way to, let's say, run this out? Yes, there is a parallel way. You can implement something called a parallel logic, but a parallel logic always doesn't really work out. We did try out parallel logics. There are a lot of things like the machine on which it runs in, and a lot of things out here. Parallel logic really depends upon the machine on which you run the parallel logic in. Because when I say parallel logic, when you write that particular parallel logic block, all PowerShell does is that it opens up multiple threads of PowerShell, multiple processes of PowerShell in your system, and then tries to execute all those things out here as such. So there are issues with, let's say, a bash script or a programming language right out of the box. You can, let's say, make sure to moderate these scripts out, make sure that the scripts are better performing, and so on and so forth. You could do that, but it's still an imperative way of command writing, wherein a lot depends upon you as a user in order to go ahead and, let's say, take care of the checks, take care of the for eaches, take care of a couple of things, and also the issue with the parallel logic. A couple of things out here that I'm really looking at. However, Azure also offers you a declarative way of creating your infrastructure. So it is imperative versus a declarative approach that you are really looking at, wherein you don't really need to understand a lot about programming. Here, See, when I do even a scripting, I still need the concepts, a little bit of concepts of what is an object, what is a data type like string, what is a data type like integer, how do I convert it, how do I handle it. Okay, I need to understand a couple of things out here as such. In a declarative way, you don't need a heavy understanding of programming. You still need the basics of it. You don't need really a heavy understanding of programming. You don't need to do the checks. You don't need to explicitly tell that, okay, fine, if my storage account exists, then please don't go ahead and create it out because it is going to fail. You don't need to put the checks like if and else and all these things out. Also, resource iterations. I say resource iterations, something like, your parallel logic out here. Let's say I want to create 5 or 6 storage accounts at one go. These are handled better. You don't need to, let's say, really write your parallel logics out here, and the performance is better while executing or while going with a declarative approach out here. And one of the declarative approach examples is an ARM template, and that's what I am getting into today. An ARM template, or let's say terraforms. These are a declarative way in order to go ahead and, let's say, create resources on the Azure portal. Same thing what I'm trying to do with, let's say, PowerShell. The same thing I'm also trying to go ahead and achieve with, let's say, an ARM template or a Terraform script. This is what I'm doing. And out of the box, very simple. ARM templates got a great documentation support. So we'll also look at that documentation out here. ARM stands for Azure Resource Manager. So the model in which you're working is an Azure Resource Manager model. And template, a very generic term. Let's say you have something like an email template. Just like I'm just giving you an example, like an email template out here. I'm sure a lot of people out here might have used it. Now, in an email template, what exactly you do is that, see, you have a header, you have a body, and you have the ending notations. All you have to do is just go to the body, update your subject, or update, let's say, whatever you want to write, fill your name in, and just send it across. And a lot of people do that. So you have multiple templates for, let's say, greeting someone, or consoling someone, or sending your regards to someone, or multiple things out here, right? So templates are reusable, whether it be email. These are reusability or reusable. It means that I can take the same template, change my name, send across to someone else, or I can take, let's say a leave template. I put my name in there, change the dates, send it across to my managers every time I want to leave, or every time, let's say, I want to communicate something. In the same way, Microsoft said, okay, fine, you know what? How about we build templates for our resources, wherein all you do as a user is just to go and change the name and deploy it onto the Azure portal, and it will create a new resource type or check the existing resource type for you. This is the idea that came up, and they said, okay, fine, you know what? If someone wants to write an ARM template, they need to know what is JSON. They need to understand the, let's say, basics of JSON, like what is a key value pair in JSON, what is an array in JSON, how do you declare something. These are the basics that are required, and they just need to have some kind of an editor to write these templates, like Notepad++ or a VS Code. Again, coming back to VS Code out here, multiple editors are there in order for you to go ahead and support the templates. See, so you can go and write your templates in one of these editors, take that entire JSON template and deploy it onto the Azure portal, and you can create your resources. That was the idea that is professed, and you have a great support for the templates. Now, if you say ARM template documentation, it will tell you, like, what's a template, how do you go ahead and let's say visit a template and etc. Create a template in JSON in let's say VS Code, create a template on the Azure portal, couple of things. And you also have a great template reference section, wherein if I click on template reference, if you just scroll down, all the objects that are there in Azure, let's say for example Azure Active Directory, or let's say for example Azure Kubernetes Service, or something that we can all relate to. If I just scroll down, you have multiple things like storage accounts. Let's say let's go to storage services, storages. So for example storage accounts, it's going to give you multiple options out here. It's telling choose your deployment language. You have something called Azure Bicep that is recently coming up, but let's stick to ARM. And as in you stick to this and click on this, it's going to give you what is the format in which Microsoft is expecting you to write this out. When I say format, these are all the expected properties from an ARM template. Now if you see this, it's a huge JSON body, but you don't need the entire JSON. These are the internal properties when you create a storage account. For example, let's say, do you want a storage account to expose to be, let's say, exposed to a public internet, allow public access? It's a Boolean value. So it's telling what exactly it is and what is the data type it is expecting. Boolean, true or false. Do you want that or do you don't want that, and etc. And if you just scroll down, it's also expecting, or it's also telling you what kind of a type property value it is, what is an API version out here that you're using, the name of the resource, location, how you pass this location, what are the tags that you can pass, the SKU, the kind, a lot of things out here. And you can also go ahead and let's say look at all these properties out here. So it's a great way in order to get started in a resource creation. And in order to create these templates, all you would need is a VS Code. So here I have my VS Code out here. Let me close these out and let me open up a new window, and let me open up a new folder, not a window, sorry. And I'll just go ahead and say create, and I'll say ATM class 1 ARM templates, and I'll just select folder. So I'm just selecting a folder out here in VS Code. I'm just opening of myself an empty folder out here, and all I want to do is click on firstly something called as an extension. So this is like the marketplace. It's like you can treat it like an app store or a play store for let's say your VS Code. And in here, just search for ARM, and the very first link, sorry, the very first link that you get is called Azure Resource Manager ARM in bracket tools by a publisher called Microsoft. Go here, and in here, in my case, I have options to go ahead and uninstall and disable this out. In your case, you'll have a small button here telling it is install. Just go ahead, hit that button out there. This should go ahead and let's say install something called as an ARM template for you. It will take about less than a minute out here to go ahead and install it out. Once that's done, I would also suggest going ahead and installing this particular extension called as an ARM template viewer by a publisher called Ben Coleman. It helps us in looking at the resources. It helps us getting an idea on how we are going and all these things. So just go ahead, install these two extensions out here, and once you have these extensions in place, I can click on this one. I don't have any file right now. I'll just say Control plus N, Control New, and then it's now asking me, okay, fine. Uh, Now please tell me which language would you like to let's say start writing in. Say select language and search for Azure Resource Manager templates. So as and when you do Azure Resource, it will automatically load telling, okay, fine, you want to write an ARM template. I'll say yes, I want to write an ARM template. And in the background, it is now loading the template server. And you would also see here that it's now telling that, okay, fine, you are writing a language called Azure Resource Manager template. You're in this particular language. So VS Code has this option, or you can also switch the language from here. It has a great capability to tell you which language they're writing and so on and so forth. Now, in order to write the template, I don't really need to do any JSON and all that stuff. I don't need to really do all these things. Normally, JSON starts like this. I have to put a JSON and so on and so forth. You don't have to do this. All you do is just now start typing in something called ARM, because I want to write something called ARM template. And with your mouse, just you can, I mean, with your keys on the keyboard, you can just, let's say, do a bottom and top and all that stuff. You can hover this out. And I would like to select the very first one called ARM exclamation. I'll say enter. As and when I did an enter, I now have a blank template for me. I have a template telling me that, okay, fine, you know what, you can get started. Tell me what you can write and all that stuff. And there are multiple properties in this blank template, like a schema, a content version, parameters, the functions, variables, resources, outputs, multiple things out here. We'll look at that one after the other. And once the template loads, it will take about a minute or so to load the objects behind the template. So let's wait for that object to load and all that stuff. In between, you can go ahead and just you can just go ahead and let's just save this template. And let's say I want to create, let's say today, a storage account using this template. So I'll say storage account, and I'll save this in a .json format. I'll save this out. So it's a storage account.json. As of now, it's a blank template. I haven't really, let's say, went inside and declared my resources on what I need to create. I just went ahead, had a blank template. In order to do this, I came up with the ARM extension. I installed this extension and I then started writing ARM exclamation. That's it. This is how I got myself to begin with writing a template out here. I'll take a quick pause to see if there are any questions that I can answer till here, and later I'll move and start explaining what is the schema, what do you mean by a content version, and then what are resources, what are parameters, and so on and so forth out here. Is any questions, any quick questions that I can take?
I think before this, we need to make a connection to Azure, right? Azure portal.
uh, Before
Just
this you don't need to, before writing your template it's not required,
oh, no, not
but
before.
after
I mean,
writing a template,
yeah,
before
creation,
deploying
during
you
the
mean?
creation. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, you would need to make a connection to the Azure portal. We'll also see that on how do you take this template and manually how do you deploy it, and how do you automate that particular deployment. We can take a look at that. Yes, any more questions, guys? Yes, anyone,
Can
any
we call up
questions?
that resources from the Azure portal through this ARM template?
I'm sorry, can you come again, please? Can we?
Can we call up that resources detail?
We are not calling the resource details from the Azure portal. So we are not really at this point extracting the resource detail from the Azure portal out here.
Oh,
What we
what
are
about
doing
the
is that we
JSON?
are sorry, what about
What about the JSON files? Can we
this? Is
call
the
up
JSON
from
file?
that JSON files or else ARM templates?
No, we are not calling a resource from the Azure portal. Rather, we're trying to create something which is not existing. So as of today, as of now, if I just go to the Azure portal, I have an empty portal. It's a blank one. I deleted a lot of resource groups today in the morning. So there's an empty portal. So I'm not trying to extract something from the portal. Rather, I'm trying to deploy something into the portal. That's what
Okay.
templates are used for.
Yeah.
Okay.
So are we completed with PowerShell, or we are going to go back with some
Not
more
really.
on? Okay,
We will be going back. We'll be doing rock. I mean, let's say forward and backwards into PowerShell, ARM, and then Terraforms and all these things. So we are
okay,
going to try play around with all these resources and see how they coherently, let's say, support each other.
okay, okay.
So let's check this out. So let's come down, and the very first thing, you have a key value pair called schema. Okay, fine. Just give me a second. I forgot to take a question that was in the chat. Just a second. Let's see. Before I go there. Okay. Okay. Where we have to install this ARM template in the local system on the Azure portal. No, in the Azure portal, you cannot install anything. Azure portal is a software as a service, so it do not really let you install anything. This is in my local system that I installed the ARM template extension. So all I did is installing the ARM template extension, and I can go ahead and let's say start creating my templates out here as such. So let's see. Now the very first thing is a schema. We can also call this as a header. Again, I do not give this link here. It's a HTTPS link out here that was given to me when I just started creating the template by that particular publisher who's Microsoft. And this is there in place to do some validations. Now, if you just click on this, and if I just open my browser, it's just going to give you a huge JSON body that's telling you per a given resource what are all the properties that you can really mention. For example, there would be something like a storage account. There would be something like a storage account inside, but as of now, I'm not going to fit this out. But yes, this is for Microsoft to go ahead and verify whether you're writing a proper resource, meaning is your name correct, or are you using the right location, or are you using the right property, or what are all the allowed properties for a particular resource. So this is for Microsoft to validate, or the servers of Microsoft to validate when you are sending this request across. So it tells you, okay, fine, you know what, this is the schema that you are deploying in. Let me go into the schema, get all the properties of your template that you are allowed to pass, and is it really valid? If it's valid, then I'll allow the request. If it's not, then I'll reject it out, is what Microsoft will tell you. Again, we got to do nothing out here. You just take the schema. Then you have something like a content version. This is for something called as versioning, meaning I can have different versions of my template. Initially, I can start with a version called 1.0.0.0. I can make some changes. I can save it. I can say storage account version 1. And then later, if I want to, let's say, do some more changes, I would come there, make a change, and I would save my template as 1.1.0.0. Again, this is for just a version controlling user preferences out here. Meaning you can have different versions of the template coexisting with each other. You can take the latest template and deploy things out here as such. I'll just leave this as 1.0.0.0 right now, not changing the content version also. And then comes something called as parameters, then functions, then variables, the resources, and let's say the outputs out here. Now, before explaining what is a parameter, or before explaining what's a function, or let's say a variable, I would sorry, I would now start with the heart of a template, which is a resource. And if you see this, this is in JSON. It's a key and a value pair, but this is in a square bracket, which means it's an array of resources. Exactly, an array. It's a JSON array, which means Microsoft is now telling me that, you know what, you have now a freedom to go ahead and declare multiple resources, not one, not two. You can have multiple resources of different types. Probably you can have a storage account, or probably you can have a virtual machine along with a storage account, or you can have an app service, or multiple things out here. You can declare at one go, and you can let's say deploy this out, and I'll help you do the same. I'll help you achieve the same thing. But today, what I want to do is I want to, let's say, start creating a storage account. So I'll go inside the resources section, say an enter, so that I can start typing something. And in order to start typing, I don't have to even know what is the basic property of a storage account. I don't really have to know that. What I can do is I can type in ARM, and as soon as I type in ARM, right, it is telling you, okay, fine, you know what, I understand you want to create a resource, and it is loading all the resources that is possible for you to go ahead and, let's say, create on the Azure portal. So I'll say ARM hyphen, say storage. I want a storage account out here. And the very first thing it's telling, okay, fine, It's ARM hyphen storage, and then you have a storage blob container. We'll see how do you create a blob container as well. It's telling ARM hyphen storage, and in the right hand, it's also telling me that okay, fine, this will create a storage account for you. And I'll say okay, fine, this is what I want. So using my keyboard, I'll say enter. As and when I do an enter, this is now going to give me the entire resource object starting from line number 8 ending at line number 21. It's going to give me the entire resource object that will help me create a basic storage account. I'll say good, great. So what do I need to change here? So it's telling me okay, fine, you know what, this particular JSON has multiple properties like the name. This is the name of the storage account. Then you have something called as a type. This is called as a resource identifier. Why is it called as a resource identifier? Is because again, when I was telling ARM templates out here, you can be using an ARM template to create different kinds of resources. How does Microsoft really understand? Is by using this particular string. Telling that okay, fine, this particular user wants to create something called Microsoft.storage, meaning they want to create a storage class and an object called storage accounts inside that. I'll say okay, fine, great. I'll help you. I'll help you doing that. And then there is something called as the API version. Again, when you send a request to a server out here, you have to tell which kind of a version this particular object really belongs to. Again, this is something very internal. I'm not changing this to. Then you have the tags, optional in nature. You can tag your resources. You can give multiple tags out here. Right now, you have a display name telling the storage account one. You can give things like the owner, the billing code, the chart, or let's say the location, so on and so forth. You can give a tag out here as such. And then you have something called as location, and this is a template function. I'll talk about what this is, but you should go ahead and let's say declare the location you want to create this in. Let's say for example I want to create it in East US2, so I'll say East US2 out here. We'll talk about what is a template function and all those things. Right? Then you have the kind. You can say what kind of a storage you want. I'm doing a storage v2, and then the SKU. Again, see when you also looked at PowerShell, right? When you said get SKU, there are multiple properties inside the SKU, like the name, the tier, and all these things, right? That's what I'm mentioning. And it's giving you an example on how to mention it. It's telling premium underscore LRS, tier is premium. So let me adjust a couple of properties. So I'll come here and I'll just go here and delete this out. I cannot give just a simple generic storage account one because it's not accepted format. So I'll say something like dev store ARMXYZ USEs2, something like this. Because I'm creating it with an ARM template and I'm giving the name calling development for a team called development. I'm creating a storage account using an ARM with some storage account called XYZ, USEs2, and so on and so forth. Again, it can follow the proper convention like your project name, the team name, the region where you're creating, and all these things. But please have a proper name out here. Do not put your names out here like Balu or something like that. Don't do a creation with your names out there. Reason being, tomorrow when you go into the organization, you'll try to let's say put the same thing. So please don't put your names. Please put a meaningful name out here as such. And then coming down, I'm not changing the type. Neither I'm changing the API version. I can add multiple tags. Here it's let's say a list of tags that I can do. For example, let's say I want a tag called owner. I can say the owner name is something like xyz@gmail.com. I can say comma. I can put something like billing code, and I can go ahead and say the billing code is something like bill or something like this. So I can have multiple comma separated values out here in the form of tags, and the resource would get created with all these tags out here. So you can give multiple tags. There is no, or you can give multiple things out here. There is no limitation. And finally, under location, right, I'll just take this out. I'll address this one at a later point in time on telling what is a template in ARM what's a function in ARM template. I'll delete this out. And what I am doing right now is I'm doing a control plus space on my keyboard. And this is going to load all the available locations that you really have. In my case, I want an East US 2. So I can take and I say, okay, fine, East US 2 out here such. Kind, I'll put it as storage v2. I don't want this in a premium. Again, I'll delete this out. I'll say control plus space on my keyboard. This is going to load all the available, let's say, replication tiers that I do have. Let's say I want a standard tier with LRS, and I'll again take this out. It's a premium. I'll say I'll create this resource in standard out here, and I'll now save this out. I have saved this out right now. I have my entire template. I've changed things like the name. I've updated things like the location, the standard LRS, and this one. I did not write really the JSON. If you see this right, I did not even write the JSON. JSON was already provided to me. It's a template. I went ahead, updated values in my template, and now what I can do is there are multiple ways in order to, let's say, treat your template. How do you, let's say, create resources using a template out here? What I can do is, like, firstly, let me use the manual way in understanding this out. So let me close this out. Let me go back here again. If you see, I have not created a resource group in my template. The creation of resource group, you can go ahead and also create a resource group in your template, but you have to go into the logics of something called linked template and nested templates and do a couple of things out here. We normally, even in a real-time environment, we don't prefer creating a resource groups directly using the RM templates out here. You just need a resource group. This is a resource group deployment template, meaning you're deploying something inside a resource group out here. So what I'm going to do is, I do not have a resource group right now. Either you can create it now or you can create it as a part of template deployment. I'll say I will go ahead and type something called deploy, and you have multiple things called deployment scripts. Deploy a custom template. I'll click on something called deploy a custom template. So I'm already there in the Azure portal. I'll say deploy a custom template. It's telling, okay, fine, we have a couple of templates. So if you just scroll down, you have something called quick start templates, and it will also load multiple templates for you. These are all predefined templates. These are all called Azure quick start templates out here. But I have my own template. So I'll say build your own template. It's going to tell, okay, fine, you know what, this is where you can load your file or you can paste your file out here. I'll say load my file. I'll just go ahead into my directory and get my file out here. So I have uploaded my file into the Azure portal, and this is the file that will help me create the storage account, etc. I'll just save. I'll just scroll down. Now it's asking me what is the resource group that you want to deploy this in. I'll say create a new one. I'll say something like demo ARM resource group, and I'll say okay. And it's asking me what is the region in which you want to create the resource group in. It's not asking me what is the region you want to create the storage account in because that's already declared in my template. So I do not really have to take care of that. I'll make sure that I put my storage account also in the same region where my, or I want to put my resource group in the same region where I'm creating the storage account. So I'll say ECS2, and I'll say review and create. When you review this out, Azure in the backend is going to, let's say, run a validation in your template, telling did you do a right schema or did you do all the right properties? And are you mentioning it properly? Then it says, okay, fine. It will also run in the background telling that if I deploy it, will I be able to create something? If yes, then yes, it will go ahead and tell you the validation is passed. And the validation also validates your syntax, also validates the naming convention, a lot of things out here. For example, if I do not pass a proper name, let's say I pass something like dev or dev, something like this, which is a name which is very generic in nature. And if I go ahead and say create new one, set demo, by now the resource group should have been created. So as a part of validation, it will create the resource group. The resource group is created. Let's hit review and create this out. And now it's running a validation telling that, okay, fine, can I create a particular resource group with that particular name called dev? And automatically it will fail your validations out here. You cannot even hit the create button. If you check the details, this is going to tell you that pre-flight validation check failed, meaning before I create, I'm trying to see whether I can create it or not. And it's telling that the storage account with this name is already taken. You cannot really create this out. So storage account is already taken. So it will not even let you go ahead and create it out. Now, let alone you go ahead and let's say deploy it out. It will not even let you, even hit the create button out here as such. So this is how it will help you in doing a validation and pre-hand tell you that okay fine, you know what, this is an error. And also if you look at the raw error, it's all in JSON. Again, if you see this, it's telling the name is not valid according to the validation procedures. Please refer to the details. It's already taken and all these things. So I'll say okay fine, not a problem. I'll edit it and I'll place it back to what it was, and I'll say save. I'll take my resource script, say review and create, allow the validation to run in, and then go ahead and do a deployment. I'll say create. So as and when I do a deployment, it's now telling okay fine, I'm submitting that particular request to the Microsoft servers in the background, and it's telling okay fine, great, now I'll start your deployments out here. So now it's going ahead and it's telling this is the target resource group into which I need to, let's say, create an ERM template, or I need to create a storage account out here, and it'll go ahead and try to create that particular storage account out here as such. So if you refresh this out, now if you see that particular dev ARM USEs 2, it's going ahead and creating that particular account out here, telling it is Microsoft.storage/storage account. It's accepted, the status is accepted, and it'll refresh. I'll just refresh the screen out a couple of times, and it should take like a minute or two to go ahead and create the resource for me. If I click on the resource, I have a storage account that got created. I have the tags of this particular storage account, which came from the template, and all the properties like the location, the standard, the LRS, everything is there in place out here as such. This is how I deploy a template manually. Also, we'll see how do you automate this deployment without even coming to the Azure portal. That's something that we will see. But yes, any questions I can take till here, anything that I can answer till here on how did we create and how did we deploy.
So does it has any dry run feature in
hmm
ARM?
when you say dry run feature, I mean before you deploy it, you want to see what
Yeah.
happens if it's
In
deployed.
Terraform, we do the dry run, right? I mean, it shows the
Yes, like you when you do a Terraform plan, it will give you
Terraform.
the
Yeah.
entire planning object. Yes,
Right.
you can do a dry run, but you cannot directly do a dry run when you deploy it onto the Azure portal. So you cannot take it. And I mean, this time I was deploying it manually, right? So I cannot when I cannot do a dry run if I deploy it manually, but I can do a dry run if I am deploying my ARM template using a PowerShell script, which I'll talk about on how to do it.
Okay.
Can we create a resource group and a storage account in the same template? Yes, you can create a resource group and a storage account in the same template, but there's an issue. ARM templates are not meant to directly create a resource group. The template, gets a little complicated when you try to create the resource group and also the resources inside it. That's the reason we prefer staying away from creation of a resource group directly using template out here. Any which ways it's taken care during the template deployment. So we say, okay, fine, we'll create it using a PowerShell script, or we can take care of it while the template deployment and so on and so forth. But yes, you can create it. I'm not telling you cannot, but it's a little complicated. Not worth investing that, let's say, complication, or not worth complicating your template out here just for the creation of resource group. Let me see a couple of more questions out here in the okay, fine, cool. Is anyone any more questions here? Okay, let me do one thing. I'll again hit the deploy custom template. I'll say build your own template. I'll load the file. I'm taking the same file. I'm not changing any property whatsoever. Same file, untouched, no property change. I'll say save. And what I'm trying to do the same is that again I'm using the same resource script and I'm trying to redeploy my template. Meaning I'm trying to recreate the same storage account. I don't have if else, I don't have nothing in my template mentioned. It's a simple template out here. I'm just trying to deploy this out. Now tell me guys, what do you think will happen if I do a review and create? Do you think that the validation will fail or anything as such?
I think it will
Anyone?
not
Any answers?
create. It
hmm
will not create. But
Okay.
validation, it may validate, validation may pass, but it will not create, right?
Okay. Validation may pass, but it might not create. Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else thinks that we can get an error because I'm trying to create the same resource again?
So it may say it is already existing. It already
Hmm.
exists.
Which is an error, right? Because if it gives you that particular error, so validation now passed. So in validation, it's not telling anything. I'll say create this out once again. It's initializing my deployment once again out here, and it's submitting the deployment. It's also doing that. It's not failing now. And let's see this. It's submitting the deployment. I'll just refresh the screen a couple of times. And now do you see what happened? It didn't say it is created. It said the status is okay, which means what my template is trying to do, or what Azure is trying to do at this point, is that Azure knows that you're using a template. So Azure is saying, okay, fine, you know what? You're giving me another template. Let me go ahead into the resource group where you're deploying, and let me see whether there is a storage account already with the same name. It says yes, the name is already there. It says okay, fine, good, name is there. So let me go into the internal properties, like does it have tags? It says yes, these and these tags and the tags that are there in the Azure portal, they tally with each other. It says okay, fine, I won't change it. It says okay, fine, is it in the ECS2 location? It says yes, the storage account is already there in the ECS2 location. Kind yes, SKU yes. It says okay, fine, all the properties tally to what the user is trying to, let's say, create out here. So I verified everything. Everything is okay. I won't do any deployment. I, as in Microsoft, won't do any deployment out here. This is called as an incremental approach. ARM templates work in an incremental mode, meaning they just validate whether the properties that you're declaring actually are there in the Azure portal. Do they tally with each other? If they do, if they do, uh, I mean, if they do, it's just going to tell you, okay, fine, all the properties are already there, so I'm not going to create it. I'm just going to validate. But if you update a property, let's say I now update a property called location. I'll change my location. Okay, I'll change my location from, let's say, East US to something like Central US. Just save this out. Back into my Azure portal. Again, say deploy a custom template. I'll say build my own template, load the file. Same thing what I was doing earlier. I'll say save. I'll take this out demo RM. I'll say review and create. Now tell me what would happen. What do you think will happen right now? Anyone?
If there is a change, I mean, it will create another resource.
There's a change.
Update
It
the
should create
location.
another resource. Sorry, go ahead, please. Update the location. Okay, there is a change. It should create another resource. Updating the location. So first thing, updating the location is not allowed because you already created this particular resource out here, and you said that this particular resource is in ECS2, and I did not change the name, so it won't create a new resource, and the validation failed. It's telling the resource with the name this one, it already exists in the location called ECS2 in this
Okay.
particular resource group, and the resource with the same name cannot be created in the location called Central
Okay.
US.
That is
Globally
globally
unique name.
universal. Okay. Globally unique. Yeah.
Yes, it's globally unique. So the name should be globally unique. Template says that okay, fine, you know what, I cannot update your location. This is something that I cannot do. This is something that I will not do. I'll say okay, fine, great. Then what should I do? It's telling very simple. Just go ahead and let's say change your name of the resource. That's when I can go ahead and let's say create you something. So ARM template doesn't work in a destructive model. It's not destructive in nature. It's incremental in nature, where it's telling you that, you know what, if the resource name that you have is already there in a different region, then I'm sorry, I really cannot create this out for you. You'll have to change your name, or you'll have to, let's say, put the location back again so that I can validate the same thing out here. But let's take 2 steps back again. And okay, sorry, take 2 steps back again out here. Let me put it in ECS2 only. I change something like standard LRS to standard GRS. This is a property field that is allowed to be updated. I can shift my tier from a standard LRS to a GRS, and I can come back from GRS to LRS, and so on and so forth. If I shift my tier, if I go back into my portal and say, okay, fine, deploy a custom template, load the file, take this file out, save this out, again take that particular resource script, review and create this out. Now the validation is passed. It's saying, okay, fine, you know what, I'll validate this. This is passed, that's good enough. And now when I create this particular deployment, all it's trying to do is that, okay, fine, it's again trying to validate, it's trying to tally all these properties, telling that, okay, fine, do they really exist? It'll tally till here and it'll say, okay, fine, you know what, the template is trying to create a standard GRS. In portal, I see it as a standard LRS. Let me try to update this out to something like GRS. I'll say, okay, fine, this is a property that has changed. So let me right now try to, let's say, go ahead and do an update to this particular property. So now let me go ahead and look at this. It says, okay, fine, it's okay, status okay. If I go into the resource, it's still LRS out here. You just need to refresh this out. It's now in a standard GRS out here as such. So if a property, if a property can be updated, ARM template will update it. If it is not, like the, you cannot change the performance from standard to premium, or from premium to standard, vice versa, or the location. All these properties are going to fail when you're trying to update your templates out here as such. So very importantly, templates work in an incremental model, wherein it will go check this out and tell you whether all the properties tally. If it does tally, it'll just say, okay, fine, you know what, I did not create anything, I just validated everything out here as such. If it doesn't, it will try to update, it will try to see whether the property can be updated before it actually deploys it out. It runs something called as a pre-flight check. We call this as a pre-flight. It'll try to check whether all the properties really exist. Can I update the particular property? In the first case, scenario one, the ECUS2, I could not really update it out because the location, once it's created, I cannot really, let's say, go ahead and change the location. And the name is globally unique. So I cannot, let's say, reproduce the same name in a different location out here. It's going to fail. But a second attempt, or in the second scenario, it will not fail because I have updated a property called SKU, which could be updated. I cannot change the tier, let's say, from LRS to GRS or something like that. It could be updated. So that's the reason. That's the reason the template is telling me, okay, fine, you know what, you can go ahead and pass your names, or you can go ahead and, let's say, create something new, or create, let's say, update the resource out here as such. Yes, any questions clear on how the template really works out?
Do you know by any chance, I mean, which properties can be modified and which cannot be? Any, is there anything in
Apart
documentation that
from, yes, in the documentation, yes, if you just go through the documentation, it's gonna tell you, apart from the region, which is the location out here, and let's say the performance tier. I mean, I'm talking about specifically to a storage account. Apart from the region and the performance tier, the other properties can be updated, like the access tier can be moved from cool to hot, hot to cool, and so on and so forth. And also, yes, the name, very importantly, name cannot be updated for any resource after it's created. So normally name and location, they are two, let's say, properties which can never be updated out there. But depending upon a resource to resource, Microsoft really, in the documentation, they tell you what property that you can update, what you cannot, and so on and so forth out here as such. If you want to create containers and blobs, can we, like an array? Yes, we can do that. I'll also show you how to create the same thing, but let's get the basics out so that we can develop on top of it. Yes, any more questions? Resource group, it's not like we should not, we can, but the only thing is that it's not really worth let's say going with the resource group, because when I do a resource group, I get into something called as a nested template. So one template calls the other and makes things a little complicated. So it's a best practice we do, even in a real-time environment. If you look at the templates, right, we normally don't create the resource group. We allow, let's say, manual creation or creating through a PowerShell script for a resource group out here. But there's one issue. If I give this template to you and tell, okay, fine, this is the final template, go ahead and deploy this out. Let's say your client is telling that, I want you to create 5 resource groups, or sorry, 5 storage accounts in, let's say, probably the same resource group out here, probably. And they're telling, okay, fine, each and every time the name should be different. Meaning, I can start with something like ECS to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. The issue with this template is that it's hard coded. It's a hard coded template that I'm giving you right now, which means all these properties like name, the location, all these things are something which are very static. And let's say I, as a client, I am forced to go ahead and, let's say, update these properties when I'm doing the template deployment. I should say, okay, fine, load the file, and then let's say go to the file, change this out. See, often what happens is that your template might not be that simple. It might be very, very big. And the property called this name might be called in several locations. In several places of your template, this name might be used again and again, which means that instead of, let's say, doing a hard coded value, just like we had in PowerShell something called variables, we have these two sections in, let's say, the ARM template called as the parameters and the variables out here. So ARM template allows you to declare something called as a parameter. For example, let's see, how do I declare a parameter? So I'll come here into the list of this one. I'll say enter. Again, I'm not typing anything. I'll just do a control plus space. Saying, okay, fine, you're here. Or do you want to do a new parameter? I'll say yes, I want to do a new parameter. Then it's telling, okay, fine, please declare the parameter in this order. Give me the name of the parameter that you want to declare. I'll say storage account name. And it's going to tell you what is the type or what is the data type of this particular parameter. Again, you have multiple things like array, boolean, object, secure string, and so on and so forth. I want to do a string. This is the name. I want to pass a string out here. And then you have something called metadata, optional in nature. You can pass description telling that name should be 3 to 24 characters. Multiple things. You can put multiple, let's say, statements out here. It acts like a description. It goes and just gives you a description while you're deploying the template. I'll just save. I'll just scroll down, and in place of name, I'll delete this name out here. I don't want to now give the name. In place of name, I now want to call this particular parameters. So what I'll do is now I'll be starting using something called as template functions to call those names. And how do I use a template function? Again, square brackets. If I'm passing the square brackets within the quotes, it means a function. If it's outside the quote like this, it means an array. And now I want to call a property. So I'll say control space. I'll start typing in something called parameters. I'm saying, okay, fine, parameters. And please use the parameter called storage account name. So I'm saying parameters, open close parenthesis. Again, I did not do the open close parenthesis. I did not, let's say, I'm not, let's say, remembering all these syntaxes. All I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, fine, parameters. All I'm doing is I'm saying parameters. And after that, I just put one open parenthesis. Automatically, it's saying, okay, fine, I see you declared only one parameter called storage account name. Is this the one that you want to use? I'll say yes. I can also declare one more parameter. For example, this parameter is any at line number 9. I'll say comma, control space, another parameter called location. in this string, I'll say location in which you want to create the storage account in. Scroll down, and in place of location, I'll remove this out. Parameters, location. This is how I can call it.
We can also use
Good question.
dot, right? Parameters dot location.
No, you cannot use a dot here because see, this is not a pure JSON syntax that I'm calling. It's a combination of JSON and an ARM template language. So according to this particular language, if I do a parameters dot, it's gonna fail. Simply saying, you know what, it's missing a function argument. So this is not how you declare it and so on and so forth. So it'll start complaining. So you cannot do a parameters dot because you're not going into the properties of a parameter, rather you're calling a parameter out here. So that's the reason you cannot do a dot out here. Getting it? All right, so I declared all these things out and there is no actual value that I declared. My template is now reusable. When I mean reusable, I'll just go back to the Azure portal, say deploy a custom template. There's a build your own template out here, load the file and take the same file, take the same file out here. I'll say save and it's going to ask me the resource group. I'll say resource group. I'll just scroll down and now they're telling, okay, fine. You know what? You have declared something like the storage account name and there's an information button here. It's telling name should be 3 to 24 characters. That's something that I declared here inside the description. And just scrolling down, it's telling, okay, fine, location, the location down you want to, let's say, create this out. So I'll say this is dev store ARM ABC UFCs 201, some name, and let's see. Okay, it's initially going to give you a warning there, but yes, location I'll say it is East US 2, and now say review and create. So what this does is now it gives me the flexibility to go ahead and declare my names on the fly or the location on the fly. And if I now say create, it's now going to go ahead and create a new object, or if the object is already existing, it's going to validate the same object out here as such. So this is the flexibility. What parameters give me and how do I declare a parameter? I give the name of the parameter, the type, and the way I call the parameter is important. It's a key value pair, but I'm using something called as a template function called as a parameter function. When I'm telling, okay, fine, please use the storage account name, and I'm saying parameters location out here in order to call that particular location in there as such. And once I redeploy this out, it's gonna ask me, okay, fine, you know what, I will go ahead create this particular name for you. It'll take a minute to go ahead and create, and the resources deployed. Standard GRS ECS2 with this this particular name and so on and so forth. The resource is actually deployed out here as such. Yes, any questions still here? Anyone, any questions that I can take till you? All right, so let me do one more thing. Go please. Sorry.
Very lightly user-friendly ARM template, right? So in which case we use PowerShell scripts, and in which case, because this is user-friendly, and so
Correct.
anyway,
So in a real-time scenario, a good question is that in which case do we use a PowerShell script, or in which case do we use an ARM template? See, PowerShell scripts are best tools for management purpose. When I say management, I'm talking about the resource management out here. For example, let's say you have a client, the client is coming down telling that, you know what, I already have so many storage accounts out there. All I want you to do is that according to a schedule, I want you to automate in such a way that on weekends, I want you to get the storage account to LRS, and on normal days, I want you to get it into RAGRS and so on and so forth. No, something like that scenario. When you want to do a resource management is always better with an imperative approach. Resource creation is always better with a declarative approach. So if you want to create something new out of the scratch, templates are a very good way to go ahead and let's say do that. But if you want to manage something, or something like, for example, the client wants to tell you that, the client tells you that, you know what, I have so many storage accounts out there. Can you go ahead, look into each and every storage account, generate a report for me telling which storage account which storage account is what, and send the report over an email. You can achieve all these things using a PowerShell script. So management and let's say dealing with the existing resource, best is let's say an imperative approach like a bash script or a PowerShell. But for creating something new, ARM are good, or a declarative approach is good. Hope that answers your question. Okay.
Yes, clear. Yes, clear.
Yes. Anyone? Any more questions, guys? Before we move. All right. So if I go into the template, I have the storage account name. I have the type. What I can do is that I can say enter and give one more thing, one more property here called as a default value. What does a default value really do? I'm looking at two different things. One is called a default value. The other is called as an allowed value out here. What they're going to do is this. So let's say default value. I just take the name of the story account telling them store ARM XYZ ABC001, something like this. I'll put a default value out here telling that, you know what, whenever you deploy the template, by default, please create this particular name. And in the location, what I'm going to do, I'll say enter, control space, I'll say allowed values. I'll say colon, and allowed values is an array. I'll say comma, because now it's a JSON, so you'll have to give a comma out here. And what I can do is I can say East US2, Central US, North Europe. And I'm giving these three as values in my allowed value section. What it now means is that you as a user, if you go ahead and try to deploy your template, by default you're going to get you're going to get this particular name, and you are not allowed to create your storage account in any region apart from the list that is mentioned in the allowed values. Allowed value again is an array. So what this happens right now to your template is that if I go ahead into my portal, take the same template, I'll say deploy custom template, take the same thing out here. Let's say build your own template, load this file. I'll use the same, let's say resource group. I'll just scroll down. By default, you will have a value here telling, okay, fine, as in like, you can pass a value to give an example to your client on how you are, let's say, passing it out. For example, now I say I don't want 001, I want 002. And change this. And this is called as an override, meaning I can override these values. So instead of now creating 001, the template will create a 002, whatever value that you're passing at the time of creation. This is allowed. And if I scroll down, I have the location value. And if I just go location property and click on this one, now I don't have an option to type here. I have an option to select here, telling it is either Central US or is it East US. Where do you want to do that? Then review and create this out. So using the allowed values, you can restrict someone from creating, let's say, your resources in particular locations or particular properties. For example, I can have one more allowed value here, telling it is SKU. I'll say this is an allowed value with the following, let's say, SKUs, like I will only allow, let's say, you to go ahead and create this in standard LRS or standard LRS or something like standard GRS. Only these two are allowed. You cannot create it in ZRS. That's the requirement. So I'll just scroll down. Instead of giving the name as standard GRS out here, I can say parameters. I can call that particular SKU telling that, okay, fine, this is the SKU out here. I'll say save. Again, if I just go back to the Azure portal, I'll just say previous. Let's say select the template, do the template again. Just save. I'll use that particular, let's say demo ARMRG. Now I have two things out here. One is asking me, okay, fine, which location. The second is asking me what is the tier that you want to select this in. So this is how I can pass in my allowed values and so on. Let's say allowed values and so on and so forth. I'll just say create this out. And this is now going to, let's say, validate my template properties and help me create the resources with the properties that I passed in the time of the runtime. Very importantly, it will take your runtime values. If you do not override, it's just going to take the default value. If you do override it out, it's going to take your runtime value and try creating the resources out here for you as such. I'll say create. It's now going to initialize my deployment, and it's now going to tell me that okay, fine. Now you go ahead and you can do a template creation out here as such. So it says submitting the deployment, and now it will go ahead and let's say okay, submitting the deployment, and it's going ahead and now let's say creating that particular resource with those properties that that you have allowed. So you can mix and match. You can choose a default value if you want to give an example, or if you want by default that particular storage account being creating in something, you can do that. And you can also use something like an allowed value function out here to restrict someone on what they can create, where they can create, and so on and so forth. Yes, any questions?
Even can we go
Mhm.
up in the
Okay.
code?
Okay.
So yeah, we are, as we know that storage account is always unique. Okay.
Hmm.
Now, what is the benefit of using default value here, and what change we didn't get that one? So instead, you gave a name, right? As a parameter, you passed that name.
Yes.
Earlier, if you pass the parameter, if you pass the storage account name as a parameter, automatically
Hmm.
it will know when you are validating the script, right?
Right.
Now, what is the benefit of giving default value here? Because we are,
Mhm.
it's
So yeah, just imagine that you are filling up a huge form. Okay, this is the first time that you're filling up a form out here. Okay, and this form has multiple things, like let's say the name. You don't know how to really write the name out here. Whether should I write it in caps, whether should I write it in all small. It would be beneficial for me. For example, let's say my name is Raju. I have a default name out here by telling it is Raju, and it's now what I'm doing this is that if you don't declare anything, I'll just go ahead and create this particular name out there for you. But what I want you to do is that I'm passing a name so that I can give you an example telling that this is how you need to pass it out. One of the advantages of having a default value. Or let's say the client wants just one storage account. He doesn't want to really go ahead and change the name of that particular storage account, but he probably wants to change the properties like the SKU, or want to change that, let's say, storage account to let's say hot to cool, cool to hot, and so on and so forth. But he wants the same storage account out here. So I don't want myself to declare it again and again during the runtime. I don't want a blank value there. I just want my storage account name there. I just want to change the internal properties of my storage account. That's where you can do a default value. And if you do a default value, you also have an option to override this at a later point in time. Let's say future, I want to use the same template. Till now, I have not been creating, let's say, a new storage account, but now I want to probably create a new storage account and also with the same properties out here. So I can go ahead, override my default value out here and create a new storage account out here as such. So default value is nothing but a default property. If you don't change it, the let's say the account will try to, let's say, or the creation or the Azure portal will try to, let's say, go ahead and validate the same account that you already have out here as such. So that's what a default value plus an allowed value combination will help you do.
Kiran, one question. How
Hmm.
do
Yeah,
you
please.
how do you delete the resources which are created?
Using the template.
Hmm.
Okay,
Can you
so
do?
normally a template is used for creation of the resources. This is the let's say primary motive of the template out here. But if you want to delete the resources, you will have to change the way ARM template works. ARM templates normally work in an incremental order, but there is also called as a complete mode in which the ARM template works. We will talk about this, but in order to change this, I'll also firstly have to tell you how to deploy ARM template using PowerShell script. And when we do that, I will also go ahead and, at the end, I'll also go ahead and tell you how do you clean up your resources using something known as a complete mode. Now, normally we don't use to clean up our resources. We don't use the templates to clean up our resources, but it is possible to go ahead and also do a cleanup. So I'll also go ahead and show you the same thing out here. But before that, I'll tell you how do you first go ahead and deploy it using a PowerShell script without even touching the Azure portal. And if you do that, what kind of benefits do you have? And what is an incremental versus what is a complete mode out here as such. Yes,
Only in
before
the
I
default
go ahead, please.
value. Sorry for.
Hmm?
Sorry.
No
So
problem.
only in the default value, if we use the default value parameter, then only we will be able to overwrite. And if we give the parameter value or like storage value directly here, can't we overwrite at the time of execution?
You can, but you'll have to go inside the template and you have to edit this particular property, not only this property. Again, as I was telling, let's say you create multiple containers inside it, and the containers are also, let's say, use the name of the storage account. So everywhere where you declare the storage account, you'll have to, let's say, go ahead and change the name,
There's some
which will
complex.
make it, yes, the complexity will get introduced, and in all likely you will make errors. You will probably miss to update the name in one place. You just update the name in one place, you don't update in the other, template will fail. So to avoid all those things, we come up with parameters to make our templates more reusable and user friendly. Yes, any more questions here? All right, so let's see. I'll just go ahead and use my PowerShell ISC today, and I want to deploy the same template. I want to deploy the same template. I don't want to go to the portal today, or probably I want to, let's say, use a PowerShell script in order to deploy this out. Now to do that, firstly, what I'll do a CD into the folder where I have my template in. Makes it easier for me to, let's say, work with that. So I'm doing a CD. I'm inside the folder. So if I do a control backslash, it's able to load my templates out here. Setting my file storage upon JSON, it's there. It's able to open that particular template. So good enough. What I'll now do is I'll use a command called new hyphen az resource group deployment. This is the command that I'm using in order to deploy a template within a particular resource group. So if I go ahead, check this out, new hyphen easy resource group deployment. It's gonna tell me that these are all the allowed values. New hyphen easy resource group deployment, the name of the deployment, the resource group name, the mode, the deployment mode out here that I was talking about. We'll see that. I'll just scroll down, look at an example, and let's see. So new is resource group deployment, the resource group name, the template file name out here. What is the template file? And there is something called a parameter file that you can have, and then the overrides that you can pass out. So let's do a very simple thing out here. Let's go there, and I'll say new hyphen AC resource group deployment. I'll wait my IntelliSense to load. Say the name of the deployment. I'll give it a deployment name out here, telling this is a sample ARM deployment. This is just the name that you are using internally. Anything, any name can be, but make sure that you don't have a space out here. The resource group name, I'll say it is the demo ARMRG. That is what I created out there if I'm not wrong. I'll move the mode right now. I don't declare the mode. I'll say there's something called template file. And what I'll do is I know that my template file is in the same folder. So I'll say control backslash, sorry, dot backslash, and I'm loading that particular file. And also very importantly, for this file, you need to tell optionally what is your default value. You can change this value, and you mandatorily need to tell where exactly you're deploying your location. I mean, which location that you want to use from this allowed value section, and what is the SKU. You can pass all those parameters as an override to your template. So I'll say hyphen, I'll say SKU, and I'll say probably SKU being something like standard underscore LRS, and I'll say something like location. And in this particular thing, I'll go ahead and give the location as East US 2. So I'm doing the same thing. And before even running this out, I did not do this, but you can go ahead and do a connect-easy account. You can do this. I have already logged in, so I'm not doing the connect-easy account out here. But you can do a connect-easy account, enter your credentials, and then get it done. Once it's done, you can go ahead, do a deployment. Okay, fine. So it's telling the demo ARMRG could not be found. Probably the name is something that I did not give properly. Let's see. It is demo ARMRG, which means that it is requiring me to log in. That's the reason it's telling this is not found. Demo ARMRG. This is the right name. Is it the right name? Yes, it's the right name. Let's see if I have the right name out here. And let me try to redeploy this out. It still gives me the error, which means that it's asking me to connect to the Azure portal. Let me do a quick connect out here. And once I connected to it, and I'll try to, let's say, go ahead and change my context. I'll give the subscription in which I want to deploy this out. So I'll just copy the subscription name. Right, let's see. Let's try to redeploy this out once again, and let's see if it is working. So earlier, yes, credential got expired. So it's not really telling the credential got expired, but it's telling the resource group could not be found, which means that it's not able to query my Azure portal, or it's querying a wrong portal out here. Now I'm doing a new -easy resource group deployment, and now if you see, just go back to your Azure portal. There's something called deployment section. Just go here, and there is something called sample ARM deployment that I gave 7 seconds ago. This was a PowerShell script call that I made. It's telling, okay, fine, this is okay, this is all good. Then it's telling, okay, fine, you know what? Yes, the sample deployment has succeeded. I just went ahead, checked all the properties, everything is good. If I change the property, let's say to standard GRS, this is allowed. If I now go ahead and deploy this template out, I'm redeploying the same thing out here as such. And again, if I redeploy this out, it's now telling, okay, fine, sample deployment is now accepted. It's looking at that particular sample deployment. So the PowerShell validates or does a pre-flight check internally, tells you, okay, fine, this is how it is, and so on and so forth, and it goes ahead and redeploys this out in standard GRS. We go to the resource. I have a GRS right now, so I can change or I can optionally use my PowerShell out here, which is something that I would recommend doing. This is the best way to go ahead and deploy this out for a number of reasons, which I'll talk about. And here, the mandatory parameters is firstly the command new-easy resource group deployment, the name of the deployment that you're giving, the resource group name that I have, sorry, and the template file. And if your template has any parameters that are not declared, you can override them using your PowerShell. You can override all those parameters. Like I had a parameter called SKU. I have overridden that. I have a parameter called location. I've also overridden that out here as such. So this is how you can go ahead and use a PowerShell in order to, let's say, execute a deployment without having to touch the Azure portal out here as such. Yes, any questions still here?
So Kiran here,
Mhm.
you used the same thing to update. Yes, we understand. Like even
Mhm.
it, the new AG resource group we mentioned. Normally in the programming, we will
Mhm.
update something. We will write, right. Even though
Correct.
it is resource group, we are updating. This is
Mhm.
incremental. It is
Correct.
so here. Resource group is already present, right? Can't we start from new
Mhm.
storage account deployment something like we have to
No,
start under
no,
the
no.
list?
No, what it's telling you is that it's telling I'm deploying something under a resource group. It's you do not have a command called new-az storage account deployment. In order to create a resource group, you're doing a new-az resource group. That's it.
Oh,
I'm not doing a deployment inside a resource group. So this is a new deployment that I'm doing. I'm not going ahead and doing, let's say, something like a resource group update. I'm rather trying to give the resource group a new deployment every time we're using this particular command. So that's the difference.
Only on we don't have an update or something.
No, it's a new hyphen AZ resource group deployment that will itself take care of your updates. Just go ahead update that particular file, and every time you give this command, it will go ahead and let's say try to update the storage account or check the storage account and so on and so forth. Yes, anyone, any questions here? Now, as someone asked earlier, is that do we have a dry run? Now, what does it really mean is that, see, I don't want to do a real deployment. I want to understand what happens if I do a deployment. I really want to let Azure Portal or really want Azure Portal to let me know what exactly would happen if I do a deployment out here. Will you create a resource? Or what exactly would happen? So, for example, for that, I'll change the name to 002, or I can actually pass this name out here in the override section. I'll say hyphen storage account name as it's a parameter, and I'm saying 002 right now instead of passing 001. I'm saying 002, so I'm overriding it. Instead of going in the Azure portal, you had that particular override right in the portal. In PowerShell, I'm overriding it using a command line, and I'll say hyphen what if. I'm giving one more additional parameter called what happens if I do this deployment, or what happens if I go ahead and let's say run this command. It's now telling, okay, fine, getting the state or getting the latest status of all the resources. It's not creating anything. It's trying to do a sample creation there. It's trying to, let's say, doing an in-memory creation out here, telling that, okay, fine, if I create it, can I create it? And if I can create it, what exactly happens? And it's saying, okay, fine, I'll get the state of all your resources, and it's querying the Azure portal and saying, Azure, can you tell me what happens if this will, kind of happen? Now, it's telling, okay, fine, I will try to, let's say, go ahead and do it and try to update this out. And just scroll down. It's telling resources change, one to change, sorry, one to create, three to ignore. Three, those are which is your tags, which is, let's say, your properties and all that stuff. But now it's telling, okay, fine, you know what, I will create one resource for you with that particular name called dev store, something like this abc002 out here as such, or something like that. So it's going to go ahead and tell you, okay, fine, this is what I'll create for you, and this is possible. It did not create this for me. If I just go back, it did not create it for me. I do not have a 002 out here. It's just telling me what happens if I run this command, and that is achieved by using something called as a hyphen what if in the end. So it's just telling me what is, let's say, the state of the resources out here. It's like, if someone doesn't know, I mean, if someone was asking, this is like a Terraform plan out here. It's telling this is a Terraform plan, and it's telling, okay, fine, three resources already there. There's something that I'll ignore, but one resource is what I'll create.
So if you remove what if and run, and then it will create, right?
Yes, if I remove that what if and run, it's then going to go ahead and create this for me.
Okay.
So if I do
And
this,
mm,
it'll
one more question is how can we redirect this output to your file so that we can share it
mhm.
with the team? Right.
So you can say what if, and you can put a, let's say, a pipe here, let's say out hyphen file. You can send it to a JSON file out here into the same directory. So you can say sample.json or sample.txt, whatever it is.
What
You
if
can go ahead and
sorry.
okay.
What if is it a parameter, reserved word, or argument? What it is
It's
called?
an
What
argument.
argument?
It's an argument. Yes, it's an argument. But just a second, sorry. I was just finishing this out. I'll just come back to your question. So putting a pipe out here and then do a out file. This is going to go ahead and, let's say, save this out into a text document, the entire output into a text document out here. So it's then getting source resources, and it'll also store it into, let's say, a text document. This is something that it's going to do. And yes, what if is an argument. It's an argument that you can pass to any command. So for example, if I say new hyphen az resource group and I give the name of the resource group telling it is some random, and say location is equal to something like ECS2. Even here, I can give a what if. Run this out. It's not going to create your resources. It's telling performing a target, it's telling resource group, it's telling replacing a resource group or creating a resource group and so on and so forth. So it's gonna it's gonna really give you an idea on what happens if if let's say you do this and so on and so forth. That's what let's say a what if statement out here does. I have a sample.txt. Not write anything. I'll have to check that out. But yes, you can store the output. You can go ahead and take that particular output and store it into a file. Probably the file format should be a little different, but I can check that and let you know why it is happening like that and so on and so forth. Yes, any more
I'll
questions,
ask
guys?
a silly question.
Go please.
Suppose accidentally or by mistake I created a incorrect storage account or
Hmm.
created a storage account in incorrect resource group. How
Okay.
can we roll back, Kiran, in that instance? How can we roll back? Suppose in production only I did that mistake.
Hmm.
How can
Hmm.
we roll back? Simply deletion or
You do not have a rollback option as such. You'll have to delete it. So it's a simple deletion and then recreation of the same thing. So you cannot do a rollback out here, especially when you create the resources, any resource as per se.
so we can justify that we did some mistake, so we are deleting that. We can tell that.
Of course, yes, you can do that. Of course, you can do that. Not a problem at all.
Okay.
I
So
mean, there
while
are some. Good, please.
sorry, while deployment is in the process, right, in between, in the middle,
Hmm. Hmm.
something goes wrong.
Okay.
So will there be some resources created till that point, or it will roll back
It will
completely?
create those resources. It won't roll back. For example, let's say I'm creating a virtual machine using the template. Everything is good until the virtual machine. Because before I create a virtual machine, I need a NIC card, I need a public IP, I need a network security group rule, and so on and so forth. Virtual machine is having some kind of a problem. Let's say you're trying to run a script after the virtual machine is created, and that script is not running, and so on and so forth. It will fail there, but it will create the resources till that point. And when you redeploy your template, correcting your template and redeploy it, it'll just go ahead and check all the resources that are already there, won't touch them, and then go ahead and let's say recreate your virtual machine out here as such. Yes. Any questions? Any more questions out here?
But if we take an example of a storage account, right? For example,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
are creating a storage account and creating a container, blob container.
Right. Right.
So for some reason, the storage account is created, and at the stage
Mm-hmm.
of creating the blob container, it failed.
Right.
And when you redo it, so
Mm-hmm.
it says that it is already existing and it will fail, right?
In the template, when you say it's
No, when
already
you
existing, when
yeah, in the storage account exists.
right,
Second
even if
time
the
when
storage
you
account
run it,
does exist, right, even if the storage account does exist, ARM is still going to work in an incremental mode, isn't it? It's going to see the storage account exists. It's going to validate all the properties of the storage account. Tells you that yes, the storage account is there. I'm not going to touch this out, but it'll work on the container out here. Getting it? So it's an
yeah,
incremental order, right? So it's going to check this out. Tell that okay, fine, it's all good. I'll leave those. So any declarative syntax works that way. Whether it be CloudFormation template or whether it be Terraforms or whether it be Azure Bicep, it's going to see how exactly the resource is created. For example, just comparing it with Terraform, if you have a storage account already, you go ahead and execute it out. It's going to look at your state file and it's going to tell you that okay, fine, the storage account is there, so I'm not going to create it. I'm not going to update anything out here. Same thing. ARM also, let's say, goes ahead and works in the same order out here as such.
yeah. Cloud formation is slightly different. I mean,
Hmm.
when we execute and it fails in between, right? So it will revoke
Hmm.
everything and it will roll back
Okay.
all the resources, and then
Mhm.
again when you run it, I mean, it tries to correct.
Oh, okay. I did not really know that. But yeah, I mean, ARM doesn't do that. So it just goes ahead, provisions the resources that are there till there, that point. And then when you redeploy it, you'll just go check those. It tells it, okay, fine, they're really existing out there. And really doesn't touch that. And recreates the resource that is not there. So that will, you know, reduce the amount of runtime that you actually do in each and every deployment out here. Finally, can I delete resources? Can I really be going ahead and doing a resource deletion? You can, It's an option that is available, but should be used in a very careful way out here. But it's not really an option to go ahead and delete it out. To be very honest with everyone, it's not really an option to go ahead and delete out. It's an option called as a complete deployment mode. What really happens in a complete deployment mode? Let me explain that. Let me take a template again. Control, and I'll go ahead and let's say do a resource manager, and let me try to breathe this out. So this is now a blank template. I'll say Control S. I'll say blank.json. It's a blank template. There's nothing out here. I mean, you can go ahead and optionally declare resources. And if I just go ahead, take this template the way it is, and deploy it using, let's say, my PowerShell command, new hyphen is a resource script deployment. Let's say name. Let's say blank. Let's say resource group name, demo rmrg. I'll say the template file. Blank.json. Now, this blank.json doesn't have any parameters, nothing. It's just a blank file. If I run this, and I'll also, let's say, there's one more option to run it in a debug mode, so that during the runtime, it will give you a lot of logs. You can do that. So if I run this out, it's going to say yes to all, yes to all. So you're running it in a debug mode. So it's going ahead into that particular portal. It's telling, okay, fine, I'll say yes to all. And it'll tell you what exactly the template is going to do in the background. So it's telling the template is valid, syntax is good. So template validation is done. And you run this mode especially when you're getting some errors. I want to know additional information about that particular error out here. So now it's telling got nothing. Enable, let's say, data collection on other service. It's got nothing out here. It's telling, okay, fine, this is an incremental mode. I won't do anything. If you look at your deployments also, it did a blank deployment, but no resources in there, nothing. It just went and it didn't even validate anything. It doesn't have anything to validate out there. So it just said, okay, fine, it's a blank JSON. I'm not doing anything, but still, if you want to deploy it, you can deploy it. But if I go ahead and change the mode of deployment, I'll say mode, two modes out here, one being incremental, the other being complete. If I change the mode out here, what does a complete mode do? Let's take an example. Let us say that you have a storage account with the name called demo storage ABC, and you are attempting to deploy this particular storage account in a resource group called demo RG, which has multiple storage accounts called dev1, dev2, dev3. Just give you an example. Microsoft will now say, okay, fine, let me see what the template has. It says, okay, fine, this is demo storage ABC out here with multiple properties under it. It will go inside your resource group, resource group, and if you are doing a complete mode, it's gonna tell, okay, fine, let me see if this storage account is there. It says no, it's not there. And now it'll tell, okay, fine, what are all the storage accounts that exist? What are all the resources that exist? Not storage account, what are all the resources that exists? Just dev1, dev2, dev3. Now it'll go back to your template. You'll see whether dev1, dev2, dev3 are they declared in your template anywhere. If it's not declared, whatever is not declared in your template, Azure will clean it up firstly. It's going to clean that up. Then it's going to provision the new resource out here. Complete deployment modes are used when you want to clean up everything and you want to create something new out here. But in my case, I'm using it in a, let's say, in a different way. I'm telling I don't need any resource. Just take this template and deploy it in a complete mode. And it's also going to give me a warning telling that you want to continue this operation. I'll say yes. It's also telling that, okay, fine, are you sure you want to perform this action on the target? I'll say yes. Now it's also giving me a warning telling that, you know what, are you sure you want to use this complete deployment mode? Resources in the resource group called demo ARMRG, which are not included in your template, will be deleted. So whatever is not included in your template, and that are existing in the Azure portal in that particular resource group, they're going to be they're going to be getting deleted. Are you okay with that? Once you say yes, that's where it's saying, okay, fine, I'll say yes to all. That's when it's telling, okay, fine, I'll move forward with your agreement. And now it's doing now a complete deployment. But what it does when it's doing a complete deployment is that you're telling me that, you know what, the resource group should be empty because the template is empty. So it goes ahead into each and every storage account out there. It'll take some time. Each and every storage account out there that is there in the resource group and not declared in your template, and start deleting all these resources one by one. And it'll give you an empty shell resource group, just an empty shell out here. This is how you can clean up your resources. The
One
idea behind
question.
complete.
Okay, sorry.
Good, please. Good, please.
Now, if I want a specific, say the blank template, so if I create only, if I declare only one storage account and rest I cannot, right? Rest just I leave it. For example, I want only the second one, 0001, and
Okay.
the rest I don't need. So that I can do it in the blank template, right? So it will remove
So
all
in the
that and
blank
existing it will leave.
template, yes, in the blank template, what you need to mention that way, that you say, okay, fine, this is storage,
Whatever
and you need to
required.
mention that particular name. Yes, whatever is required, you can mention it here. Say, for
That
example,
will
I
be
will
skipped
00
and the rest of the things it will be removed. Okay.
will be deleted. So whatever is there in your template, it's not going to really touch that. It's just going to validate it out.
Okay.
Whatever is not there in your template, it's just going to erase all those things out here. In my case, I'm trying to erase all these things. Now, if you see, it's getting deleted. All these things are now getting deleted out here, and it'll also delete this out because I've already given a template deployment with a blank. It's, as we speak, it's happening in the backend. It's telling, okay, fine, I'm trying to, let's say, deploy an empty resource group for you, and once it deploys, you probably even won't see this out.
So Kiran,
It'll take some
here in this case,
time.
take this use case. Take this use. You,
Okay,
if we
good.
have, if we have a containers blobs under that storage account,
Okay,
it will clear all the tail level also, like containers
everything.
blob.
Yes, yes. If you kill a parent resource automatically without you saying it out, it'll go ahead and
Okay.
also delete your containers. It'll go ahead all those things out. Yes, it'll delete all those things. So
Okay.
that's the reason, even if you look at the Microsoft documentation, it's going to tell you that, you know what, you'll have to play a little bit caution here. Complete deployment is a destructive mode. So it's also telling you it should be used in a very rare case scenario where you are sure you want to delete it out. Yes. Any more questions? Anyone? Any questions that I can take till you? I should delete this out too. It'll take some time to, let's say, provision this out. Complete mode usually takes some time. So once that's done, it should also go ahead and, let's say, delete these things out too as such. Because it did not even save the template, so it won't even take this out. So it'll take some time to go ahead and clean this out resources. If you see in the background, it's still going ahead and trying to do the deployment. So it'll delete everything. It'll wait for those to get deleted, and once the server returns a particular value that it's deleted, only then it'll move forward. So it'll take some time.
But
Uh,
you
Good,
have a
please.
recovery option, right, Kiran? If something went wrong.
I'm sorry. Can you come again, please?
No, but still we have a recovery option, right? If something wrong when deleted, we can recover it, right? Still.
Provided, provided you have a soft delete, and soft delete only applies to your containers and the blobs inside a container. But if you delete a storage account itself, it's an undoable option. I mean, it's not a recoverable option out here. You'll have to recreate your resources, upload, and all these things out.
And I think complete is something a critical argument we have to make sure which,
Let's say
right?
you are, yes, you are, let's say, you want to, let's say, delete all the resources and recreate something new. That's where, things like complete can help you out here as such.
So
But
does
we have
ARM maintains any state information like
No,
Terraform?
it doesn't. No,
Okay.
it doesn't. Because ARM is directly a serialization context. It's a JSON, right? So, and Azure servers can understand JSON directly. So it doesn't really go ahead and maintain the state. It will try to get the state from the Azure portal directly out here, like unlike Terraform. Is any more questions, guys? And in tomorrow's session, we'll be looking at resource iterations. Like, let's say I have I'm creating one storage account out here. How can I create multiple storage accounts out here, or how can I create multiple containers inside a storage account and vice versa? So this is the concept that we'll try, let's say, addressing. And then we'll start taking some assignments on, let's say, things like how do you create a virtual machine using an ARM template. If you are able to create a virtual machine, can you create a virtual machine into an availability set? Can you also do a load balancing with that? Multiple things out here as such. So that's going to be the idea, and we'll try to see multiple concepts inside the ARM template tomorrow, like concatenation and all these things. So please do attend tomorrow's session, and we'll see how do you use these ARM templates for our advantages out there as such. So that's it from mine, guys. Have a good day ahead, and we'll meet tomorrow. Thank you.